Hey there, this is the Small Fish, Big Podcast, a show for the gallus few who dream and do. If you're a small biz owner, a creative freelancer, or someone dreaming about leaving your 9-to-5, this is the podcast for you. Each week, I'll chat with an inspiring guest who will share their entrepreneurship story before we delve into a discussion about running a creative business. Thanks for tuning in. Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Small Fish, Big Podcast. Now, if you're just tuning in for the first time today, I'll give myself a quick introduction. My name is Rhiannon Louden. I am a brand photographer and brand strategist, and my business is Small Fish Photo Co. And I also do wedding and family photography under another brand called Rhiannon Neil Photography. So when I am not making this podcast, I am normally out and about with my camera, although with us being in the midst of lockdown 2.0, that has not been happening as much as usual. I am also mum to a 3-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old rescue dog, and wife to a 40-something-ish Scottish guy. So that's me in a nutshell. If this is your first time listening in, this podcast is all about small business, advice, tips, stories, inspiration, anything to do with running your small business, and sharing the stories of how other female founders got to where they are today. Now, my usual format for the podcast is to have a different guest on every week. So I have a featured guest or guests if there are a couple of women running their business, and we talk about their story, how they got to where they are today, and then we delve into a topic that relates to running a small business. But today, with it being episode 20 and with there being lots of crazy stuff going on in the world around us, I wanted to change things up a little bit and do a solo episode. So this will be a little bit shorter because as much as I'm very capable of droning on for an hour, you would probably get quite bored of listening to just my voice for that long. But I wanted to take things a little bit more personal today. So this still pertains to running a business, but I wanted to talk about lockdown burnout. So I know that I am not alone in feeling this way because I see lots of other people talking about it online. I have had lots of conversations with some of you about this, whether we've set up a Zoom call or sent messages back and forth or commented on each other's posts. I know that most, if not all of you are feeling at least some degree of lockdown burnout. To give a little bit of perspective to anybody listening in the future, we are in the very start of December, 2nd of December today, and in some parts of Scotland, we have gone back into a second lockdown. I happen to live in Glasgow, which is one of the areas that's been affected, and we have gone into a tier 4 lockdown, which essentially means all non-essential shops are shut, we can't go out and meet a friend for coffee, we can't go into each other's homes, that kind of thing. And from a business perspective, for a lot of us, it means that the scope of our work has completely changed. We can't offer some of the services that we used to offer. We can't work the way that we normally would. For some product-based businesses, things maybe haven't changed quite as much. But if you are a service-based business, chances are this has had quite a big effect on you and the way that you work. Now, aside from the sort of physical effects that this has had on businesses, I want to talk more about the mental and the emotional aspects that it has had on us as business owners. So we all know that this has impacted everybody, whether you work in a 9-to-5 career, whether you're a stay-at-home mum, whether you're retired. It doesn't really matter where you are in your life. This has affected you in some way. But I want to talk about it from the perspective of a small business owner. I think most of you who are listening are probably small business owners as well, but if not, you can probably relate to a lot of what I'm saying anyways. Now, I'm going to preface the conversation by saying that I was actually listening to another podcast when I came up with the idea for this episode. It is called the Social Hub Podcast, run by a lovely woman called Stacey, who's actually based over in Australia. I came across the podcast just looking for some business related content to listen to, and she is fabulous. So you should definitely go and check her podcast out as well. She had a similar episode where she spoke all about the sort of mental aspects of this lockdown and how it's felt as a mum, as a person, and as a business owner. And she spoke a lot about the pressure that we tend to put on ourselves, even if it doesn't feel like we're putting it on ourselves and it feels like everybody else around us has expectations for us. I think this has become more prevalent than ever right now because the world has changed so much around us, and we've had to try to figure out how to cope with that, how to find a new way to work and how to get by. And it's been very challenging, I think, in every aspect of our lives. So I'm going to go back to the first lockdown for a minute. So if we'd go all the way back to March, and I guess the differences between then and now from my own personal perspective. So when the first lockdown hit, I think the first feeling that I really went through was anger and frustration. I had spent the last 5 years building up my business, and I had finally gotten to a point where I was feeling happy with my workload. I was feeling quite excited about the amount of work that I had in the diary. My year was looking really good financially. And I was really excited about some of the bigger projects that I had set up or that were in the works. And then all of a sudden it felt at the time like that was just pulled out from under me. I felt like it was all taken away. And from that kind of initial anger and frustration stage, then from there it was just discouragement, it was worry, it was stress about the future. I definitely had days where I thought, is this even going to be a sustainable business anymore? What am I going to do? How am I going to bring in any money this year? How am I going to keep a business going without having any new work to share? That was the kind of stuff that was running through my head. So I basically decided at the start, that's it. I have to keep going. I have to do as much as I can possibly do to make sure that I stay visible and everybody can see me working hard and see what I'm up to. I need to do all these new things. I need to get my website up in tip-top shape. I need to post every single day on social media. I set myself these expectations that were pretty much impossible to meet, especially considering that I now had she was 2.5 at the time, so a not even 3-year-old at home to entertain all day long. And I'm very aware of the fact that I put that pressure on myself. So yes, I did have to take care of my daughter all day. That's the way it worked in our house because my husband was still able to work and we needed his income more than ever with me not being able to work. So basically during the day, I was responsible for keeping Charlotte busy. He took a little break at lunch so that I got a break. And then when he finished work at 5 or 5:30, then I would have a little bit of time to work on my own business as well. So essentially what it was is me keeping a toddler occupied all day long, maybe having a hour long break to go for a run or take the dog for a walk, and then basically working from then right up until midnight, sometimes 1 a.m, basically killing myself over trying to just be visible and do as much as possible and look busy and productive. And in some ways, I suppose it worked. I got a lot of messages, feedback from clients and friends and people in my audience saying like, you're doing amazing. You've done so much during this time. You're really on top of your social media. This is not me bragging about myself. I don't really think that it was anything to brag about, but people were noticing that I was very present online and they were noticing the work that I was doing. And that made me think, oh, well, I have to keep going. If people are noticing, I need to keep going with this. And basically that led to a total burnout. It was way too much. I mean, the amount of things that I had on my to-do list for the day was just ridiculous. And I had almost no downtime. I mean, my only downtime was really my bit of exercise, that I was getting out for every day, and exercise is very important for me. It's really, really important to my mental well-being, as well as obviously physical. But yeah, that was really my only time. I did not have time to just sit and chill out with a book. I was, if I was watching Netflix or something, it was on in the background while I was working. And I think I was, burnt out is really the best way that I can describe it. And after a while, that really starts to take its toll on you. If you're trying to keep up with that and keep that going week in and week out, eventually that's just going to catch up and you end up sort of a ball of stress and exhaustion and just overwhelm. And definitely I was not in a very good place. Then things changed. Things went a little bit more back to normal slowly. We got a few more freedoms back. You know, we could go out for lunch again. We could go back to the gym, things like that. So things started to feel a little bit more normal, and my work picked up again. And, you know, I sort of found some sense of normality as Charlie went back to nursery as well in the summer. And now, a few months later, we are in lockdown 2.0. It's funny because I was speaking to somebody yesterday, one of my clients and colleagues, and she was saying that she didn't expect the second lockdown to affect her the way that it has. And I feel the same way. I kind of thought, okay, when the announcement got made, we've done this before, it's fine. Last time it was like 20-something weeks. This time it's only 20-something days, at least initially. And I thought, if we could do it before, we can do it again. But for me, all those feelings of like, I have to do everything came rushing back. And thankfully, this time I have a little bit more wisdom behind me, and I'm trying to find a happy medium. I am not going to work all day, every day from morning until night. You know, it's a little bit easier with Charlie being back in nursery because I do have some daytime hours. But if I'm being honest, the last 2 nights, I did not go to bed until after 2 both nights, because I was up trying to work on some stuff for my website, and to finish, updating some portfolios. So these are pressures that I have put on myself. There's no client waiting to see updated portfolios. Nobody else is awaiting me having a brand new sparkly website. And I think it's really interesting that we put these pressures on ourselves. And I've been trying to think a lot about where those pressures come from. I do think part of it is, if you're feeling a little bit under pressure already, and then you go on social media and you see everybody's highlight reel, you see everybody talking about all their accomplishments and how much they're doing and how they're baking amazing artisan sourdough loaves by hand and all of these things that people are getting up to. You know, they've taught themselves how to paint like Monet and all these amazing things that people have done. And that's great. I'm not trying to take that away from everyone. I think having a hobby and an outlet and something to keep you busy is fantastic. But if you feel like you maybe haven't managed to do those things, or from a business perspective, you don't feel like you are in the same place as somebody else, maybe someone else has done loads of amazing things during this time and you don't feel like you have, that just adds to the pressure, and you start to think everyone else is doing so much better than I am. Everybody else is so much further ahead. They're getting so much more done. They're being so much more productive. And again, nothing wrong with people sharing their accomplishments. I think it's great. And I think as a community of small business owners, we need to celebrate each other's accomplishments, but it's the way that we perceive that. So if somebody else posts that they finished their website, that doesn't take anything away from me because I haven't finished my website. But in my own head, I sometimes look at it that way and I think, oh, if they've done it, I should be able to do it too. And that should is a word that I think is especially damaging when we start to put those expectations on ourselves. I should be able to do this. I should have managed to get that done. We're in the middle of a pandemic. So I think we should all give ourselves a break. These are hopefully once in a lifetime circumstances that that we are all just trying to navigate as best we can. And I think putting crazy amounts of pressure on yourself in normal times is unhealthy. Putting crazy amounts of pressure on yourself in these times is completely unfair. And I think it's really unattainable. If you're making yourself this massive to-do list every day and trying to get more done than you normally would with everything else that's going on, it's just, I think this is why so many of us are feeling burnt out and tired and discouraged and completely overwhelmed. And I think almost everybody that I speak to is saying how much they feel like they need a break right now. So on Monday, when I put a little note up about this episode and said what I was going to talk about, I asked if anybody had any specific topics related to lockdown and burnout that they would like me to mention or bring up. And I had a few comments there, so I wanted to take a minute to chat about those. So Carrie Scott Art, who I've been chatting back and forth with for a little while on social media, she does beautiful work, but she also has a really great Instagram account where she speaks really openly about her own struggles with her mental health. and just with the way that she's feeling, and how difficult it can be as a creative when you're not feeling 100%. So if anybody else is feeling that way, she is a